Hi, everybody. It's a brave new world here in the United States of America, and we are going to be talking. We are going to be talking about a movie here that may have, some implications towards things that are currently happening today. In my mind, anyway, we're going to talk Heretic, the new A24 movie starring Hugh Grant, and I cannot remember the director's names. There's two of them, I think, on this.
It's Brian Wood. Shit, I have it. Give me 1 second.
Hold on, let me bring that. See, this is how prepared we are. Scott Beck and Brian Woods. I got it.
There we go. I was in. I didn't know the order, but I essentially had it.
Yes.
I get half.
Yeah, for sure. So we haven't done any reviews on Outpost Unknown in quite a while. We have been very, very busy, very, very stressed in our lives, and it's just the site's kind of taking it back.
Did something happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there something happening in the world?
Did you just wake up? Did you just wake up to this morning? Don't look at the news, Rachel.
Oh my god! Can you imagine? It's like those people who were in cults, or there was this actor who was in a cult, and he was off on the compound, and he came out 3 years into COVID, had no idea there was a pandemic.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you woke up to this? I mean,
did you ever watch Civil War? Alex Garland's Civil War movie?
So I kept being I'm going to wait till after the election. It's too scary. It's too bleak. I'm going to wait till after the election. Okay. And now I'm never!
Okay. I think there's a review for that up on Outpost Unknown. Yeah. Alex Garland's Civil War is an interesting movie in the context of America today. But we're not talking about that. It's
especially scary because it's about journalists in that era.
That's true.
So there's layers of anxiety.
That's true. That's true.
As a professional journalist.
Yeah. You might what I will say, we're getting off topic of Heretic here, but what I will say to anyone who is interested in Civil War, you haven't watched it yet, there is a review on Outpost Unknown, I believe. I think I did a review for it. The interesting thing about that movie in particular is that it doesn't tell you why the Civil War happened. It's just these journalists trying to make their way to Washington, D.C. to interview the president, and then sort of seeing all the stuff. And there's this one scene in the movie that I feel is very poignant, and it's these journalists, and there's a sniper on the roof of a house, and he's shooting at these other two soldiers, and these journalists are right there, and they're like, "Who are you shooting at?" He's like, "I don't know." And they're like, why are you shooting at him? Because that person's shooting back. They have no idea if they're shooting at the person on the same side as them or who the person is. Interesting movie, worth a rewatch in today's context, I think. But we're talking about Heretic. A24, synonymous with quality pretty much, right? I mean, has there ever been an A24 movie you've seen that you're like, man, that was awful. That was terrible?
I mean, there has definitely been ones that I liked less, but I have, for the most part, I would say I could at least appreciate the artistic merit if it was not to my taste.
Sure. They have a certain style, I feel, that these films do, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you look at it and you're like, oh, this must be an A24 film. Look at this low lighting with bokeh and shallow depth of field and the yellows. It's like it has a very interesting look that all these films do. Though I will say, before I saw this movie, they showed a trailer for Y2K. Have you seen the trailer for that?
You're gonna hate. I've seen the movie.
Oh my God!
Gonna hate it.
This thing looked. I was aghast when I watched this trailer. I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
It's the least A24 movie they have ever put
exactly.
out. For sure.
I was like, "Oh, A24, Y2K. What is this?" And it's like From the Mind of Jonah Hill, and I saw the most cringy, awful '90s kids I've ever seen in my life on screen, and I was like, "No, A24." Do not go the way of Blumhouse. Do you remember when Blumhouse had nothing but 100% cred? They were just banger after banger. And then it was Night Swim and all of this fucking trash. And you're like, okay, Blumhouse, you lose your entire name, your credibility. I don't want A24 to lose that. And if Jonah Hill causes that to happen to me, I'm going to be angry. But
I think some people are going to love that movie. It feels like a Blumhouse film, though. I have to say, tonally, the way it looks, what it has to say, who cameos in it, feels profoundly Blumhouse. It is the antithesis of what you like.
Oh, I'm going to avoid it. I mean, I hated the trailer. The trailer was like, oh.
I mean, you should hate watch it.
No. over the next few years, I just want to do things that make me happy. I don't want more negativity in my life. I'll avoid
That's fair.
Y2K.
That's fair.
But let's talk about Heretic. Give the high level overview. Like, what is Heretic ostensibly about?
Okay. I don't know. How are we handling spoilers? Are we spoiling or should I be very, very general?
Let's be general, and then we'll just give a spoilers notification for anyone who wants to bail before they've seen it.
Sure. Okay. So ostensibly, it follows two young female Mormon missionaries who are on a mission in Maine, and they spend their time proselytizing to people. And at the end of the last person they're going to go see is this man named Mr. Reed, who has previously expressed desire to know more about the Church of Latter-day Saints. So they go to his house, and after talk to him on the porch for a little bit, they agree to go in under the belief that his wife is there. In fact, she's even baking them a blueberry pie. So they sit down and begin having a theological discussion. But when they try to leave, because this wife never materializes, they realize that they cannot leave, that the house is locked, and they're going to have the only way out is through. So they're going to have to go deeper into the house and listen to the ultimate, well, actually, guy on the planet.
Yeah, yeah,
They have any hope of getting out.
yeah, for sure. And
How was that?
no, it's great. That's great. That's great. I will say I won't go into too many details, but I have. I'll just touch on a personal story from my past. There. How do I go about this without like exposing a lot of stuff?
Oh, just say it.
Okay, so I have family members who are Mormons, like crazy Mormons. And this is just a funny aside.
Like,
I'm not going to go into like super in depth theological conversation here, but a
mhm.
certain person in my family. I don't even know if I've ever told you this. A certain person in my family who is now deceased. Can't say I'm not happy that he's deceased because he was a bad person, but he was very very high
Okay.
in the Mormon Church, and he said
Oh, I didn't
some
know that.
yeah, he said some really, really terrible things about my mother and my sister, my newborn sister, and all sorts of stuff. And DJ and I were in Grand Island at the time. We were walking. Now, people kind of, because he is sort of, I won't say he's famous, just regionally, like he was the head of the church in that area.
Hmm.
So everyone kind of knew who I was, or at least my last name when I would say it. And DJ and I were walking with carrying our guitars because we'd always walk around like handing out flyers to come to the Hot Carls show and stuff like that. Plug, check out the Hot Carls album on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. It's right there. So we walk up, and these two Mormon missionaries walk up, and I am probably 18, 19 years old at this point. I'm just full of fire and
Uh-oh.
brimstone. Uh,
Oh, here we
like they
go.
like people used to show up at my grandma's house, and I'd be wearing like my Marilyn Manson T-shirt. I'd open the door, and they'd want to talk to me and sort of so. And I would sit there and I would have conversations with these
Oh, I bet you
individuals.
were like
Oh
rubbing
yeah,
your hands
oh
together,
yeah.
like, here we
I
go.
love the reason why I'm saying this is because it's going to set up how I sort of feel about this movie. I identified with Hugh Grant's character
Oh,
quite a bit in
no.
this.
Oh, no.
In
Oh,
terms
no.
of the debate, I'm saying just in terms of the debate, in sort of
Mhm.
posing hard questions to true believers, and I think we can
Yeah,
extrapolate this to not just religion, but all sorts of things in society right now where hard questions need to be posed and asked of certain
indeed.
beliefs and belief systems and beliefs in individuals,
Indeed.
things of that nature. And so these two individuals come up and they start telling me, and I know that they're Mormons, and I know they know who my grandpa is. As soon as I name this person, they didn't know who I was, but as soon as I named my grandpa, they're going to know who it is. And so I let them give the spiel, right? I let them give the spiel, and then I was like, "Oh, do you know so and so and so?" Right? And they're like, "Oh, yes, yes," and they start professing all the greatness of my grandfather and how wonderful he is, and all of this stuff. And then I proceeded to be like, "Did you know?" Boom, 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 and I just laid out all this dark, hidden stuff that none of his followers, his flock, I don't know what the Mormons call their congregation sort of thing, but um, everything that he had basically done to help destroy my family over the years, and my mother and my family and stuff like that. The look on their face was just,
Oh, I
it was
bet.
like what you just did. It was like their eyes went wide and they were just like in shock. And I basically told them, because I was young, I was immature, I was basically like, you can take your fucking religion and go shove it up your ass. I don't want anything to do
I
with
think it's
any.
kind of
Yeah, I
punk.
was like,
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with anybody who spouses this and then acts like this in their real life. And then I was like, bye bye. And we went
Hmm.
wandering off. So the reason why I state that is because this movie, uh, kind of like, I won't say hit home to me, but I really enjoyed the philosophical, theological sort of arguments, not just from Hugh Grant's side of things. There's a sequence in here
Hmm.
where he's using like Monopoly to explain the different, theological
Iterations.
iterations and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And he shows like, hey, check out all these, from 5,000 years ago, the ancient Romans had this deity and stuff. And it's all the same sort of iteration of the story, distilled in different ways. But I also liked when, gosh, I can't remember the names of the two, girls, but
Sister Barnes was it the one from the Star Wars that we've seen,
okay, she
and
had the
then
dark hair,
Sister
right?
Paxton.
Paxton was
Yes.
the blonde, and the other one was the brunette.
Yes.
But I like
Yes.
that she challenged him at a certain point, Hugh Grant, when she's like, "Look, you say here are the aspects of these that are similar, but you don't actually mention all of the differences that are way more than this, and you are yourself
Hmm.
distilling it all down." So I liked the back and forth of that, because it. I love a good debate, and I will debate people even though like I don't necessarily believe in what I'm arguing, to test them, to see how much they know about the thing that they're actually doing. And I love getting people to question themselves in their own belief systems, because
Yeah.
I think there's something.
I still think you need your spinoff called The Devil's Advocate,
That's the devil's advocate. I think it's because
where you just argue with someone and you flip a coin to see which side you're on.
I could do it. I could do it because I think there
I
is something
know.
incredibly telling about an individual. In this movie, Hugh Grant is really trying to basically get people to question their faith and question whether or not, what they hold core to themselves is real, and if they actually believe what they have just been told, or if to get them to question it. But I feel like this film went about it the wrong way. I think if I was Hugh Grant, getting them to question themselves, that moment of doubt in the first place, that wait a minute, that in and of itself
Mhm.
is the proof that he would have needed. Now it's a horror movie, basically, so you got to go through the motions of all the horror and the freak out and anxiety and stuff like that. But I liked those moments when they appeared in this. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that, or how you thought about the film overall?
I mean, I was kind of, I will say the experience of watching it was, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I felt like it was an exercise in tension. I felt like it was an exciting bit of a ride. What I kind of came away from it just feeling a little queasy about is that I feel like it's quite murky in what it's trying to say. Like I feel like they couldn't decide like as right like the film writers could not decide where they wanted to land in these ideas. And so it feels murky and kind of unfinished and kind of like a thought unfinished. And so I felt like kind of like an irritation or a frustration coming out of it. I also, like some of the stuff he's saying, because I'm someone who's like pretty agnostic, like I found myself like you kind of wanting to like root for the way that he's like kind of pecking away at their sort of their belief system that is based on not on logic but just like in his opinion basically indoctrination,
Yeah.
which me personally that's how I feel, but like I'm talking about in the film itself. um but the things that he's saying are a little frustrating because it totally reminded me, and this is probably my personal experience coming into it, is like I grew up in the church. I grew up kind of with blind faith. And then I went to college and I thought I was taking an Indiana Jones style class. And it turns out forensic pathology is basically about the mechanics of natural selection and evolution, and it like kind of was the thing that unwinded everything in my brain. And then I took a world religion class, and it was like the same thing about how these archetypes have existed throughout world religions. And so this was he was kind of saying the things that like 19-year-old like fresh out of the church angry Rachel was
Yeah.
saying. And so it felt a little so like that part of it I was just like, on top of him just being such a well actually guy, I found myself like my teeth kind of grating at the same time. I don't know. I guess I wanted it to be cleaner. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I struggled with this movie.
It definitely gets messy at the end in terms of
Mhm.
like, well, we won't get into spoilers quite yet, but I think the end was probably the weakest part. I think the best part of the film for me personally was kind of like the build up. And then
I agree.
when it started getting into like
Mhm.
dominoes falling here and here, and oh, here's the real puppet master behind like the everything going on. It felt rushed. It felt like it didn't have the impact. Like I felt like at the beginning was like the filmmakers are really trying to say something here. I would have been okay with them
Mhm.
not landing on one side or the other if they had given sort of equal weight to both sides. I don't really feel like they did that necessarily in this movie. And so,
Mhm.
and at the very end, it's just kind of, it's almost ambiguous to a point where it's like, is it, well, I won't get into it yet, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, before we head into spoilers, we always love to give letter ratings on these here. Your letter rating for Heretic.
So I think that it has incredible performances, even though there are times where I think some of the writing is absurd. I think across the board, all three of our sort of main characters are really great in this. I think it's moody. I love the set design and the use of all of the religious iconography. The pace, even though a lot of it is really talky, I found those parts of it very very tense. So I think even though I have my quibbles with it, overall, I really did like this movie, and I would give it like a straight B.
Okay. Okay. You're pretty much where I am as well. I think I go B minus. I do think the performances are fantastic. I think that Hugh Grant was kind of perfectly cast in this because he's like just like this super
So
nice
charming.
rom com kind of guy, and you're just like, is surely he's not going to do anything to these girls, right? And so I thought he was really really good in this. I liked I liked most of it. Like I said, up until like he really started testing their faith, and we'll get into that with the
Yeah.
spoilers, with kind of like the chicanery that's going on and whatnot. I was less interested in that, but yeah, I'm probably right there, B minus. I think on a good day, you might be able to get me to a B. I definitely think it's worth watching.
Oh yeah.
But don't go into it expecting that the end is going to give you the answers that maybe you want from either side. If you're a religious person, I don't think it's going to answer what you want. It's not going to
Hmm.
say, see, religion is real. And if you're a skeptic, it's not going to answer, see, religion's not real. It's kind of like
Yeah.
you watch it and you, if it's
Yeah.
designed to make you think, then I think it succeeds because
Yes. I
I left the movie and I was thinking about it, and that's a testament to a good movie, regardless of whether I think that I necessarily agree with everything that they're trying to say or doing within the framework of the movie itself. The fact that I was walking home and I was like, this is interesting, and I like this argument.
Mhm.
I like how this was going on, and what does if it makes me reflect on sort of like my own thinking, then I think it succeeds. So we're
Mhm.
both on the same page. Spoilers now, everyone. If you don't want to know anything about it, you can skedaddle and then come back and watch this. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, guys. We need those subs. We're 5 away from 1,000. So, um,
Also, yeah, we need you to give some love to this algorithm, or we're just going to be putting out American Ninja Warrior
oh my
things.
god, yes, holy cow! So yeah, American Ninja, everyone, is our our big money making. Those are our evergreen videos where we get all of our subscribers from. These American Ninja videos,
So
whatever.
weird. So
So
weird.
spoilers. Do you want to delve into any particular spoilers that you think are noteworthy or that you want to discuss?
I mean, I think we have to talk about sort of the thesis of the movie for sure, which is like the end end. And I don't know if you want to end up there or start
Yeah,
there
we
and
can
work our way back.
do whatever you choose
All right, look at this. Feminism wins again.
for another
Okay,
month and a
that has
half.
really been the
For
theme.
another month and a half.
Don't.
Enjoy it while you got it.
No, okay. So I think here's the thing is on one hand, I think what the movie has to say when it's at its most interesting is actually also when it's like at its weakest in its storytelling, which is weird, right? I think the idea that he sees his thesis essentially is that the one true religion, it doesn't matter what the doctrine is. It's at the end of the day about control.
Yeah,
And I think that that is kind of true to some degree. I mean, there is the counter argument that Sister Paxton makes about like community and connection and thinking about others. But the people often with the most power in those systems tend to be that way. There is an element of control that just is part of doctrine, right?
yeah,
Um, but I also think it's when the storytelling is the sloppiest, like it's when the subtlety that you had in those early scenes where they're having that back and forth is lost. So I'm of two minds, like I think the movie is weak at this part, but I'm also like, okay, this is an interesting idea. And I can see how that started as the core initial idea and they worked their way back from it.
yeah. I thought the idea that control is sort of like the ultimate religion. Religion is control. Was a really, I won't say clever. Maybe clever is too strong a term, but it was a really good end goal.
It's poignant.
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking about that because throughout the whole movie,
Right.
Hugh Grant is talking about when you go through this door or whatever, you're going to find the one true religion. You go down there, you're going to find the one true religion. And so I was very interested. I'm like, what is this going to ultimately be about? And I didn't quite see that, but when he presents his control, that's the moment where you're like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
actually, you start thinking about all of this stuff, and it is about
Mm-hmm.
control, right? It's about, you got free will, but if you don't live your life in this particular way, you're going to burn in hell for the rest of your life, for example, right? And we have
Yep.
friends that believe that, we have, lots of individuals that just sort of believe that, and the film sort of asks, like, well, do you really believe that? Or do you just believe that because you were told that's how it was when you were small? Like you grew up with it. And I think a lot of people who are religious don't really think about that in terms of like, well, no one's controlling me. I'm not being controlled. Well, sure you are, right? You're being controlled at all times. When you go to your church and on every Sunday, they expect you're going to put some money in that plate when it's passed around. Yes, it's ostensibly because we need money to keep the lights on in our church and blah blah blah. But it's a version of control. They're getting basically not necessarily through guilt or shame, maybe peer pressure at the very least, like you,
Mhm.
you got to do this, you got to do this to be a good person, or you got to do X, Y, and Z to live a certain life, otherwise you're fucked, and so you start getting told this stuff over and over and over. It alters how you may otherwise walk through the world and how you interact with other human beings. And so yeah, I thought the idea that control is religion is control, capital C control, was really, really good.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It just felt like I wish if Hugh Grant's character had been less of a basic. He just comes across towards the last third of the movie as just your typical horror villain, like haha, twirling like I'm gonna torture these girls and blah blah blah. He
Yeah.
doesn't need. There's a moment in here where he's like, I'm gonna make you witness a miracle, and basically this woman like dies in front of them, and then they get distracted, and boom, she comes back to life at a certain point in time, and he's like, see, miracle. I think they feed, or she was eating the blueberry pie, and it was filled with like hemlock or
Yeah.
something like that. And
Yeah.
so as a viewer, I'm like, that's not going to be real. Like if his thesis from the very beginning, he's questioning all this religious stuff. I know
Yeah.
that that's not going to be real, and I feel like these two girls are smart enough to realize that that's not going to be real. Now I understand they're scared and there's all kinds of stuff going on, but they weren't really
He
presenting.
also is underestimating them. I think that's also one of the important things of this, and I think that the movie intentionally sets you up as the audience to underestimate them as well.
Yeah, especially was it Paxson, the blonde girl, because they're kind of like
Hmm.
they do kind of subvert your expectations. Her character is very kind of like wide-eyed, not like oh everything's blah blah blah. And the other girl is kind of like you can tell she's lived some life, and she has different experiences. They don't really go into detail as to why she herself has kind of gone into Mormonism, but the
Family.
family
Yeah.
kind of, but it's not like it's not super. They don't explain
And
lay
I think
everything out.
one of them is born into the church and the other one's mother converted.
Right, right.
So she has a little bit more of a complicated relationship. But what I appreciated was like you're like, okay, this is the one that has a crisis of faith. This is the true believer. And what we end up with is actually something far more nuanced and interesting.
Yeah,
I actually found myself thinking about you in the scenes where she's facing off with him and like conversations we've had about like a connection or a like being very strong in your values.
yeah.
And I thought about you actually
Oh,
in the theater in
good.
that moment
Well, that's the thing. Like,
from the conversation we had recently had. Yeah.
yeah, and that's part of the problem I had is because I felt like the the brunette girl. I can't remember her name. What was her name again?
Barnes.
Barnes.
Yeah, Sister Barnes.
Sister Barnes. Sister Barnes felt like to me that's who I kind of connected with on of the two girls, right?
Of
And
course.
so I'm
Well,
sitting,
she's a little more
yeah,
a little more
and I'm
worldly, a
sitting
little
here
less
thinking
naive.
like, okay, if I'm in this position, what would I do? And I'd be pointing out like all these flaws in this guy's thing, but it didn't seem like they realized it maybe quick enough. And so I'm sitting there at the theater like, come on, clearly this woman didn't die and come back to life. You're not seeing a miracle, so to speak. But now eventually they get there. But
Yeah.
I just feel like the third 30 minutes, it just felt so rushed and sort of like I'm just your typical horror movie villain kind of thing. And
Hmm.
the end, there's a whole thing with a butterfly. So Sister Paxson, right? She says at the beginning, or at some point when she's talking to Hugh Grant, she's like, "Well, when I die, I want to come back as a butterfly, and then I'll land on the finger of my family or friends, whatever. And they'll know it's me." And then
Yeah.
at the very end, she sort of spoiler, she gets out, she escapes, and then she kind of sees the butterfly land, like a butterfly land on her finger. I was wondering how you interpreted the ending. Did you interpret it as maybe she gets stabbed, like Hugh Grant stabs
Yeah.
her? Was she dead in that moment, and she was sort of seeing some sort of supernaturally thing? Was she hallucinating, or was she like? How did you read how the end played out?
It felt very intentional on the filmmaker's part that they wanted to make it so ambiguous that you could go either way.
Yeah.
As I was watching it, my interpretation was the butterfly was Sister Barnes,
Okay.
proving to her that like there was something else, that like there was something. But then they cut to her empty finger. And so then you could
Yeah.
like and that is the final sort of beat of the film is the empty finger. So maybe the filmmakers are putting their thumb on the scale, but it feels ambiguous to a point that is a little frustrating.
Yeah. And I was actually I show you've seen Frailty, right? The Matthew McConaughey, Bill
Oh,
Paxton.
it's one of my all-time favorites.
Okay.
Yes,
So
love that
I
movie.
showed that movie to a friend of mine. And I was like, "What do you think?" He's like, "I hate it. I hate this movie." And I'm like, and
And then the friendship ended. I'm so
he's
sorry.
not a religious person at all. He's he's an atheist. He does not believe in any of that stuff. And I
Huh,
was like, "Why did you hate that movie?" He's
why?
like, "Because it says that religion is real." He's like, "That
It's
movie."
also a fictional
He's like, "That
movie.
movie ultimately says that it's real," and he's like, "I just can't get past that." And I always thought that was kind of interesting, in terms of like he was such a non-believer in this stuff that he couldn't even enjoy like a fictional thing, basically stating
Mhm.
at the end, because that Frailty is all about, questioning what's real and what's not, right? Is my dad really, an angel or whatever, and killing demons and stuff like that? There's that whole tension, but he hated the fact that the movie Frailty puts its thumb on one side and basically tells you this is real. And so I thought of him when I left this. I was like, I wonder how he would interpret this ending. Would he consider it thumb on the
Hmm.
scale of it real, or thumb on the scale of it not being real, and whatnot? But I like,
Where did you land?
that's a good question. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff this past week. A little bit we've talked about before we even started recording, and it's like I am conflicted on a lot of things lately, and I've been noticing like I don't know where I'm landing on stuff. Like I'm
Is
seeing
that
things.
kind of a new?
It
Is that
is.
new for you?
It is because
Yeah, yeah,
normally I feel like I can
yeah.
kind of like reason things out pretty well. I'm like, all right, I'm landing on this.
Right.
But it feels like reality is not reality right now, and everything I'm watching doesn't seem real, and it's making me just wonder like what is happening, like what I can't process things right now. And maybe I'll just be able to
Yeah.
as time goes on, but so many strange things are going on right now that it just makes me be like, I think it's okay to say I just don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
That's totally
I
fair.
just I
I
don't
just
know.
know you are someone who kind of like has a very clear idea of what you think about things. Like
Mhm.
like it's very straightforward, and I'm watching you struggle in a way that, not in a bad way, just like I see the conflict
Yeah,
in you for the first time,
but
and
I
I'm like,
think
it's
that's
fucking messy over here, my
it
friend. It's
is. It
messy.
is. But I think if there's a power to this movie, it's almost like I don't know if I would
Hmm.
want them to tip the scales either way, honestly. I think the movie's
Yeah.
better kind of ambiguous because it causes all these questions and makes you kind of wonder, makes you think about yourself in a way, and not necessarily in this deep intellectual, like, oh my God, I'm going to spend the next
Yeah.
5 weeks wondering about my own belief systems now. But just the fact that a movie can make you just kind of go, I don't know where
Yeah.
I land on this. I think I'd have to see it again.
Yeah.
I'd have to watch it
Yeah.
again and process it a
Yeah.
little fuller upon, because this feels like a movie upon second viewing might hit differently than the initial viewing. There's a lot in this movie that feels kind of like Hugh Grant's talking a million miles a minute, right? He's like da 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 da
Yeah.
da da
Yeah.
da
Yeah.
da da
His
da da
Jar Jar Binks.
da da, and we're yeah, and we see like these girls like Barnes and Paxson. It's almost like how I felt watching it. They're like kind of confused. They don't really know what to think at first. They're kind of like, what?
It's he's doing it on purpose. It's dazzle camouflage,
Yeah,
and it's like this very rapid fire manipulation
yeah. It's
tactic that he's using. It's meant to take them off their feet, but then he smiles and smarms at
yeah,
them
and it's like think
and like
about that.
gaslights
Yeah,
them.
there's like
Yeah,
think
it's
about this and ask a question, and you're just kind of like, but you've said 15 different things in the span of 30 seconds. How am I supposed to process all of this? I would have
mhm,
loved this
mhm.
movie. They never would have done this, but I would have loved this movie to have just been him inviting these girls in, and it's just a theological debate for like 80 minutes. Sitting at
And
the
then the door opens. Yeah.
something like, just a debate, because I think the acting was so good, and I think that
Oh
the
yeah.
girls were real smart. Obviously, when you're completely freaked out, what the fuck is going on. You're not going to be on your like argument debate game at the moment, but they came up with really good
I
arguments for them. Go ahead. Sorry.
I also think that, and this might be just like a different lived experience situation. I actually think some of what is happening, I recognized, is a survival tactic of they're like essentially, like we've talked about this before. There's like fight, like flee, fight, and fawn is the other response, which is to smile and to appease. And I felt like I recognized in their performance that appeasement that they're doing, and I love that moment where Barnes realizes it's not working, and then just like finally says all the things that she's thinking.
Yeah.
So there's actual survival. It's they're confused, but there's also another thing that's happening in this film that is so smart, which is that survival experience that I was just like, ooh, I recognize that. That
Yeah.
is, every mile I've had on like public transit to someone who's being a creep, like and being trapped in an elevator with someone creepy, like all of those situations. Oh boy, it like that's one of the moments where it elevated my sense of fear because I recognized like a real world threat
Yeah.
in their performance.
Yeah. So yeah, anything else you wanted to say? Any other interesting tidbits that you wanted to bring up about Heretic?
I mean, I just am enjoying Hugh Grant's villain era. I don't ever want to see him in a romantic comedy again. Just
Yeah.
make him a creep and a bad guy, and I
He was
like
good.
weaponize that stuff. Weaponize
He was
it.
so good
It's
in
great.
this. He was so good in this. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's Heretic,
Hmm.
everybody. Let us know what you think down in the comments below, and we'll be back in the future with another review of something. I will be reviewing Oddity. I know Rachel said she hadn't seen it in forever, but I will be reviewing Oddity coming soon here on Outpost Unknown because I watched that and I was kind of like flabbergasted by that movie as well. I keep watching these movies and I'm just kind of like, they're making me think about things, and I'm just like, they never used to before. So stay tuned for that, everybody. But till then, see you next time on Outpost Unknown. Hit that like and subscribe.